When I worked in my last contact center role, I was a manager. And I had been in my management position for about 6, maybe 7 months. And it occurred to me that not once since I had been in this position had I had an escalated call from a customer. I mean, not one time in 6 or 7 months. I had a supervisor in place in the contact center whose job it was to handle escalated phone calls. So if a representative was talking to a customer who demanded to speak with a manager or supervisor, Lygia, that's her name, would take those phone calls. If a customer called in and demanded to speak to the president, and that did happen, the calls were routed to Lygia. But after 6 to 7 months, not one time did a customer request to speak to a manager. And I thought that is very, very unusual. So I went to Lygia one day and I said, I've noticed that in 6 months, I have not had one escalated call. What's going on here? And Lygia reminded me that she had been with the company for 25 years, that she'd heard everything, and that she could handle literally everything. Well, I thought there has to be more to it than that, to go 6, 7 months and me never having a call go past her. So I said, well, what is your approach? And Lygia said, I just talk to them. It's as simple as that. Well, I thought it couldn't be that simple. I thought, no, there's something more to it. There's a trick. There's a method. So I asked Lygia, would you mind if I listen in on some of your escalated calls? I want to hear your approach. I want to understand what you do. Because we did have lots of escalated calls coming from the representatives after someone requested a manager. So I know that existed. I just knew the calls did not get past Lygia. She had no problem with me listening. So for a period of about 2 weeks, I listened to a random sample of escalated calls when customers would demand to speak to the president, or right out of the gate want to speak to a manager, or when a representative just couldn't handle the call and it escalated. And after listening to the calls for about 2 weeks, I realized there really was a method to Lygia's approach. Now, she said she simply talked to the customers, and she's right. She did simply talk, but I noticed that she did 3 things consistently, particularly when the customer demanded to speak to the president. They were usually very upset. The problem was very serious in the customer's mind. So when she would get a customer on the phone who demanded right out the gate to speak to the president, I noticed Lygia would do 3 things that I later called the USA method. Now, Lygia likes just simply saying, I talk to them, but she really did do 3 things. So here's what USA is. I noticed that Lygia would start with an understanding statement. And then she would sort of explain her situation. And then the A is for action. She would let the customer know what action she would take. Now, let me walk you through how Lygia managed to keep calls from escalating using this very simple 3-step method. She would start by giving a statement to the customer that showed that she could empathize. She acknowledged the customer. It demonstrated her understanding of the request that the customer was making. So she would say something similar to, I can certainly understand why you would want to speak to the president. So she didn't come back with a defensive response. She didn't counterattack. She didn't flat out refuse to let the customer speak to the president. She simply said, I can understand why you would want to speak to the president. And that was brilliant. It's her way of acknowledging and empathy. When a customer is escalating, they are angry or they're frustrated, they're upset, and they have specific needs. And one of those needs is they need to feel acknowledged. Next, Lygia would explain the situation. So she would say something like, I am in this position to talk to customers like you. It is my job to answer questions and to fix problems. I love that. She was almost, pleading with the customer to let her do her job. Not in a way that is begging, but a very confident way that displayed her position and her area of expertise. So this is my job to answer questions, to help customers. And then she would go right into A, which is the action, where she would say, now, if I am not able to help you, absolutely, I will put you in touch with someone who can. And so Lygia was right. She simply talked to her customers, but it's a little deeper than a talk. She was very strategic in acknowledging, giving a sincere statement of empathy, explaining her role, and then giving them a choice when she said, if I'm not able to help you, certainly I'll let you speak to someone who can. Well, once I determined that Lygia did these three things consistently and they worked consistently, I put together a training that we called Lygia's USA method. And together, Lygia and I trained our representatives to use the USA method when they were dealing with a customer who right out of the gate wanted to speak to a supervisor, or when the conversation escalated. So we trained them on how to do this. We let them listen to Lygia in action, and not at all of a surprise to me, my agents were able to go out there, go forward, and drastically reduce escalations. So try Lygia's USA method. I imagine you'll get the same results we did, a drastic reduction in escalations.